I'm Hilda Meyer, 62 years old, and after 30 years as a corporate attorney, I thought I knew heartbreak. Then my daughter Audrey, whom I raised alone after her father left, sent me an email that shattered everything. "Your presence will embarrass me," she wrote about the Paris wedding I was funding with my retirement savings. All because I couldn't speak fluent French like her fiancé Jean-Pierre and his aristocratic family. I had to make the hardest decision of my life. Where are you watching from today? I'd love to know in the comments. If my story resonates with you, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. You won't believe what happened when I woke up the morning after cancelling that $175,000 payment. I wasn't born into privilege. My parents immigrated to America from Germany with nothing but hope and determination. They worked factory jobs in Milwaukee, their hands calloused and backs bent from labor I was determined to avoid. "Education is the only way up," my mother would say in her thick accent. I believed her with every fiber of my being. When I was accepted to college as a first-generation student, my parents cried with pride. They couldn't contribute financially. There was never enough money. But their emotional support never wavered. I worked multiple jobs, earned scholarships, and graduated with honors. Law school was the logical next step for someone with my drive. During my second year at law school, I met Richard. Handsome, charismatic, and seemingly ambitious. We married quickly, too quickly as it turned out. I became pregnant with Audrey during my final year of studies. When complications required bed rest, Richard showed his true colors. He wasn't prepared for sacrifice or struggle. 6 weeks before Audrey was born, he packed his things and walked out. "I never wanted to be a father," were his parting words. I gave birth to Audrey between my final exams, literally bringing textbooks to the hospital. My mother came to help for 2 weeks, but with my parents' own financial struggles, I was soon on my own, a new law graduate with a newborn and mounting debt. Richard sent a check after the divorce was finalized, but disappeared from our lives completely. He never saw his daughter, not even once. Those early years tested every ounce of my strength. I secured an entry-level position at a corporate law firm working 70-hour weeks while juggling childcare costs that consumed nearly half my salary. Sleep became a luxury. Many nights I would rock Audrey to sleep, then spread case files across my tiny apartment floor, working until my eyes couldn't stay open. Despite the challenges, I was determined that Audrey would never feel the absence of her father or the constraints of our financial situation. I developed rituals to make our limited time together special. Sunday mornings were sacred. We made pancakes shaped like animals, built blanket forts, and read stories until Audrey's laughter filled our small apartment. I took on extra cases to afford her ballet lessons when she showed interest at age 6, rearranging my schedule to never miss a recital. As my career advanced, so did our circumstances. By the time Audrey was 10, I had made junior partner, and we moved from our one-bedroom apartment to a modest house with a small backyard. I still remember Audrey spinning in circles in her new bedroom, eyes wide with wonder at having so much space to call her own. Education was non-negotiable. I researched the best private schools and worked additional hours to afford the tuition. When Audrey showed academic promise, I hired tutors to nurture her talents. Money was always carefully budgeted. My own clothes came from discount stores, so Audrey could have what she needed to fit in with her more affluent classmates. As a teenager, Audrey developed a passion for art history. I knew nothing about Renaissance painters or French Impressionists, but I bought books, took her to museums, and listened attentively as she explained the difference between Monet and Manet. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and these shared experiences deepened our bond. When Audrey was 16, I established our tradition of annual mother-daughter trips. Our first adventure was to Washington, D.C. Nothing extravagant, but it was the first time we'd traveled together purely for pleasure. Seeing the national art galleries through her knowledgeable eyes made me see beauty I would have otherwise missed. Each year after that, we saved for a new destination: Chicago, Boston, eventually London when she was 18. These trips were my greatest joy, watching my daughter grow into a confident, cultured young woman. Audrey's acceptance to Brown University was a moment of immense pride. Yes, the tuition was staggering, but I had been saving since her birth for precisely this purpose. When she expressed interest in studying abroad in Paris during her junior year, I took out an additional loan. "This is an investment in your future," I told her, hiding the paperwork for the second mortgage on our home. Phone calls from Paris were filled with her excitement about art, architecture, and the French lifestyle. She returned speaking conversational French with a sophisticated edge I hadn't seen before. Still, she was my Audrey, warm, thoughtful, calling me several times a week, even as she completed her master's in art history and secured her first position at a prestigious New York gallery. Over the years, I attended every exhibition she curated, beaming with pride as she explained complex artistic concepts to wealthy collectors. Sometimes I felt out of place among the cosmopolitan crowd, but Audrey always made me feel important. "That's my mum," she would say, taking my arm. She made all of this possible. When Audrey was promoted to international curator at 30, requiring regular travel to Europe, I worried our connection might suffer. Instead, she sent daily updates and brought back thoughtful souvenirs. Our Sunday brunches when she was in town remained sacred now at upscale Manhattan restaurants instead of our kitchen table, but with the same intimacy and laughter. As retirement approached, I envisioned more time together, perhaps joining her occasionally on her European trips, or simply being available whenever she returned to New York. After decades of putting my career first, I was ready to prioritize family. My financial advisor confirmed I had built a comfortable nest egg that would support a modest but secure retirement, with some extra for small luxuries and emergencies. I had given Audrey everything I could: opportunities, education, unconditional love. The smart, successful woman she had become was my greatest achievement. I thought our bond was unbreakable. I couldn't have been more wrong. Audrey's voice had a different pitch when she called me from Paris in early spring 2 years ago. "Mum, I've met someone," she said, with an excitement I hadn't heard since she received her first museum position. "His name is Jean-Pierre Beaumont. He's incredible." Jean-Pierre was a curator at the Louvre from a family she described as old French aristocracy. Their meeting at an international art symposium had apparently been like something from a film. He'd approached her after her presentation on American modernist painters, disagreeing with her thesis in a way she found intellectually stimulating. Within weeks, their professional disagreement had blossomed into romance. Our Sunday calls now included Jean-Pierre, who would appear briefly on the video screen, tall, impeccably dressed, with a carefully groomed beard and the casual confidence of someone who has never questioned his place in the world. He would offer a brief "Bonjour, Madame Meyer," before disappearing, leaving me with the distinct impression he was fulfilling an obligation rather than showing genuine interest. Eager to connect with the man who was clearly becoming important to my daughter, I downloaded a language app and began learning basic French phrases. My pronunciation was admittedly terrible. French wasn't offered at my public high school in Milwaukee, and German, my parents' native tongue, had been my second language. Still, I practiced diligently, wanting to show respect for Jean-Pierre's heritage. During one video call, I proudly attempted to say, "Pleased to meet you," in French. Jean-Pierre's response was a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and a correction so rapid I couldn't catch it. Audrey laughed, not her usual warm chuckle, but something higher, more affected. "Mum's trying," she said, in a tone one might use for an amusing child. 4 months into their relationship, Audrey and Jean-Pierre planned a trip to New York, where I would meet him in person. I spent weeks preparing, researching French customs, practicing basic phrases, even learning about wine pairings to avoid embarrassing my daughter. I bought a new outfit more expensive than I would typically allow myself, wanting to make a good impression. We met at an upscale French restaurant in Manhattan. Jean-Pierre greeted me with the formal double-cheek kiss, his posture rigid. Throughout dinner, he directed most conversation toward Audrey, occasionally translating parts of their private exchanges with a condescending smile. When I asked about his family, his responses were polite but minimal. The moment that stands out came when I mispronounced Bordeaux while ordering wine. Jean-Pierre corrected me immediately, demonstrating the proper French pronunciation with exaggerated patience. "Americans always struggle with our language," he said to Audrey, as if I weren't sitting right there. "It's charming in its way." Audrey didn't defend me. Instead, she laughed that new laugh again and placed her hand over his. "Not everyone has your ear for language, darling." That evening marked the beginning of subtle but significant changes in my daughter. Her text messages began including French phrases. Her Instagram posts featured quotes from French philosophers I'd never heard of. Even her voice took on a slight accent during our calls, something that disappeared when she became excited or upset, then returned when she composed herself. When speaking with her American friends, she was the Audrey I knew. But when Jean-Pierre entered the room, she transformed, her posture straighter, her gestures more restrained, her speech more deliberate. It was as if she were performing a role she thought would please him. 6 months after meeting Jean-Pierre, Audrey called with news they were engaged. The proposal had happened at his family's chateau in the French countryside. "It's been in the Beaumont family for generations," she explained, her voice breathless. "His great-grandfather was a count." I offered sincere congratulations, pushing aside my concerns about the speed of their relationship. When Audrey began talking about wedding plans, I assumed we would follow the tradition of the bride's family hosting. I had saved for this moment since she was small, setting aside what I could for her future wedding. "Actually, Mum," she said, "we're thinking of a Paris wedding. Jean-Pierre's family expects it." "Of course," I replied, swallowing my disappointment. "Whatever makes you happy, sweetheart." "And it should be next spring," she continued. "The gardens at the Beaumont estate will be perfect then." "That's only 8 months away," I said, surprised. "Is that enough time to plan?" "Jean-Pierre's mother knows everyone in Paris. She's already making calls." In that moment, I realized I was being sidelined from one of the most important events in my daughter's life. But I reminded myself that this wasn't about me. I would adapt, as I always had. "Just let me know what you need from me," I said. What I didn't realize was how dramatically "what you need from me" would be redefined in the coming months. The first wedding planning call included Audrey Jean-Pierre and his mother Madame Beaumont speaking rapid French that left me struggling to follow. When I asked if we could speak English for my benefit, Madame Beaumont sighed audibly before switching languages. "We were discussing the guest list," she explained with thinly veiled impatience. "Jean-Pierre's side will have approximately 250 guests. How many will you be inviting, Madame Meyer?" When I suggested 30-40 people, close friends, my colleagues, and our small extended family, Madame Beaumont exchanged a look with her son that made me feel as though I'd committed a social faux pas. "The Beaumont annual garden party has more attendees than that," she remarked, "but perhaps American families are smaller." Audrey jumped in quickly. "Mum, remember this is an international wedding. Many of my professional contacts will be there too." The budget discussion came next. I had saved $50,000 for Audrey's wedding, a significant amount that had required careful planning over many years. "That's a good start," Audrey said when I mentioned the figure. "But Paris venues are expensive. And with the guest list—" By the end of the call, the estimated budget had somehow doubled to $100,000. I sat at my kitchen table afterward, calculating what this would mean for my retirement plans. I would need to postpone retirement by at least a year, possibly two. But wasn't that what mothers did? Sacrifice for their children's happiness. Over the following weeks, the wedding plans expanded in scope and grandeur. The venue changed from Jean-Pierre's family estate to a historic Paris hotel, requiring substantial deposits. The guest list grew to include French cultural ministers, museum directors, and art world celebrities I'd only read about in the magazines on Audrey's coffee table. Each time I raised concerns about costs, Audrey had the same response. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime event, Mum. Jean-Pierre's connections will open doors for my career." 3 months before the wedding, during a video call to discuss final arrangements, Audrey casually mentioned that the budget had increased again. "We're looking at around $175,000 now. The floral designer Jean-Pierre's mother wants is extraordinary but expensive. And we've added a second pre-wedding event." The figure knocked the wind out of me. That amount would deplete most of my retirement savings. I would need to continue working well into my 70s. "Audrey," I said carefully, "that's significantly more than we discussed. I'm not sure I can manage that amount without serious financial consequences." Her face fell immediately. "You don't want me to have my dream wedding?" "Of course I do, sweetheart. It's just—" Jean-Pierre appeared in the frame, his hand on Audrey's shoulder. "Perhaps we should speak with my parents about contributing more," he said to her, not acknowledging me directly. "Though they've already secured the venue and the chef as gifts." Audrey turned to him, panic visible in her eyes. "No, no. Mum will figure it out." She looked back at the screen. "Right, Mum. This is important for our future." In that moment, staring at my daughter's pleading face and Jean-Pierre's expectant one, I made a decision that would later haunt me. I agreed to the increased budget. The following month, I flew to Paris to see the venue and meet Jean-Pierre's family properly. Audrey seemed tense from the moment I arrived, correcting my clothing choices and providing constant reminders about French customs. "Try not to speak too loudly," she coached before dinner with the Beaumonts. "Americans are known for being boisterous." The dinner at the Beaumont family apartment near the Arc de Triomphe was an exercise in subtle humiliation. Despite my attempts to engage in my limited French, the conversation flowed around me with occasional translations that were clearly edited versions of what was actually being said. When I asked questions directly, responses came in English, so technically perfect, yet delivered with such condescension that each interaction left me feeling diminished. Madame Beaumont, elegant in that effortless French way, made a show of switching to English periodically. "We must include Hilda," she would say, before asking me questions about American politics, or making observations about cultural differences that highlighted what she clearly saw as American inferiority. At one point she remarked in English, "It must be challenging raising children in America without the proper emphasis on history and culture." Audrey is fortunate to have found her way to more refined influences. I watched my daughter during this exchange, waiting for her to defend her upbringing, our country me. Instead, she nodded in agreement, adding, "I was lucky to study abroad. It opened my eyes to what I'd been missing." The wedding planning meetings conducted during my visit were similarly exclusionary. Discussions about floral arrangements, music selections, and menu options happened primarily in French, with Audrey occasionally translating abbreviated versions for me. My suggestions, a particular song for the father-daughter dance, a family recipe for the dessert table, were dismissed as too American or not quite right for the setting. I discovered that the guest list had expanded to over 300 people, only 10 of whom were my friends of family. When I expressed concern about my loved ones feeling out of place, Audrey assured me they would be seated together, effectively segregated from the predominantly French-speaking crowd. The final straw came during a meeting with the wedding planner, when I learned Audrey had selected a designer dress costing nearly $30,000 vintage champagne at $200 per bottle. and accommodations for Jean-Pierre's extended family at five-star hotels, all to be covered by my rapidly depleting savings. That evening, in my hotel room, I called my financial advisor in the States. The conversation was sobering. If I committed to the current wedding budget, I would need to work at least 5 more years beyond my planned retirement age. The comfortable, if modest, retirement I had carefully built was evaporating before my eyes. When I attempted to discuss financial boundaries with Audrey over lunch the next day, she became defensive immediately. "You don't understand how things work in France," she said, cutting me off. "Jean-Pierre's family has a certain position to maintain. If our wedding doesn't reflect that, it would be humiliating." "Audrey, I've supported every dream you've ever had," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But this is beyond what I can reasonably afford. We need to find compromises." "There's no room for compromise," she insisted. "Either we do this properly or not at all. Besides, think of it as an investment in my future. Jean-Pierre's connections will benefit my career for decades." When I suggested that a loving marriage shouldn't depend on an extravagant wedding, her eyes flashed with anger. "You're jealous," she said, the accusation cutting through the cafe air. "You can't stand that I'm marrying into a family with actual culture and heritage instead of being stuck in Milwaukee with factory workers." The words struck like physical blows. I had never heard my daughter speak this way. Not about me, not about her grandparents who had worked themselves to exhaustion to create opportunities for our family. This wasn't the Audrey I had raised. I returned to the States the next day, deeply shaken, but still committed to funding the wedding. My daughter clearly wanted more than my presence or approval. The final payment of $175,000 was due the following week. The email arrived at 11:37 p.m., just as I was preparing for bed. The subject line read simply, "About the wedding. Important." I opened it immediately, assuming Audrey needed approval for some last-minute expense or change of plans. Instead, what I read changed everything. "Mum, after careful consideration and discussions with Jean-Pierre and his family, we've made a difficult decision. We think it would be best if you didn't attend the wedding ceremony or reception. Your lack of French language skills has become a significant concern. The event will be conducted entirely in French, and your presence would create awkward situations requiring constant translation. Additionally, Jean-Pierre's family has expressed reservations about cultural differences that might be disruptive. To be blunt, your presence will embarrass me in front of my French in-laws. Your American accent, clothing choices, and unfamiliarity with proper French etiquette would create uncomfortable moments that would detract from our special day. We'll arrange for a live stream so you can watch remotely. This seems like the most elegant solution for everyone involved. The final payment is due tomorrow. Please confirm the wire transfer. Audrey." I read the email 3 times, unable to comprehend that these words had come from my daughter. The daughter I had raised alone, sacrificed for supported through every phase of life. The daughter who was now banning me from her wedding because I might embarrass her, while still expecting me to pay $175,000 for an event I wasn't welcome to attend. My hands shook as I set my phone down. The initial shock gave way to a deep, hollowing pain, unlike anything I'd experienced before. I moved through my quiet house like a ghost, touching photographs of Audrey through the years, holding her first art project graduating from college, laughing with me on our trip to London. Had I somehow raised a person capable of such cruelty? Or had Jean-Pierre and his family transformed her into someone I no longer recognized? Sleep was impossible. I sat on my back porch until dawn, wrapped in a blanket, replaying every moment of our relationship. The bedtime stories, the scraped knees I had bandaged, the teenage heartbreaks I had soothed, the checks I had written for tuition, the care packages I had sent during finals weeks, the job interviews I had helped her prepare for. A lifetime of love and sacrifice dismissed because I couldn't properly pronounce French vowels. As the sun rose, clarity came with it. This wasn't really about language, it was about shame. My daughter had become ashamed of her middle-class American upbringing, of my lack of aristocratic connections, of everything I represented. In her quest to be accepted by Jean-Pierre's family, she had decided I was expendable. For 30 years I had put Audrey first. Her needs, her dreams, her happiness. I had defined myself primarily as her mother, measuring my success by her achievements and opportunities. I had never demanded gratitude, but I had expected basic respect and love in return. Now, with painful clarity, I saw that continuing to finance this wedding would be an act of self-erasure, an endorsement of how I was being treated. At 7:30 a.m., I called my bank. The representative expressed concern when I explained I needed to cancel the pending wire transfer of $175,000. Ms. Meyer, this is a significant amount. Is there a problem with the recipient? Yes. I said, my voice stronger than I expected. The terms of our agreement have been unilaterally changed. I will not be proceeding with the transfer. I understand. I'll process this cancellation immediately. The funds will remain in your account. After hanging up, I sent a brief email to Audrey. I have cancelled the wedding payment. I cannot in good conscience fund an event I'm explicitly uninvited from. When you're ready to talk about what has happened to our relationship, I'll be here. Then I turned off my phone, made a cup of tea, and waited for the storm I knew would come. I awoke the next morning to the insistent ringing of my landline, a service I kept primarily for emergencies. When I answered, Audrey's voice exploded through the speaker. What have you done? The venue called saying our payment didn't come through. They're threatening to cancel everything. Good morning to you too, Audrey, I said, my voice remarkably calm. I explained my decision in my email. Are you insane? The wedding is in 3 weeks. You can't do this. Actually, I can. And I have. This is about the email, isn't it? I was just being honest. You always taught me to be honest. I took a deep breath. Yes. It's about the email, and about the months of watching you become someone I don't recognize. Someone who would exclude her mother from one of the most important days of her life, while still expecting her to pay for it. You're being dramatic. We're offering a live stream. You'd be uncomfortable anyway with everyone speaking French. I raised you to be better than this, Audrey. I'm disappointed in who you've become. There was a moment of stunned silence before her tone changed completely, becoming cold and calculating. Fine. If that's how you want to play this, I'll have Jean-Pierre's father call his attorney. You committed to this payment. We have it in writing. Have them call. I've already spoken with my attorney this morning. This was a bluff. I hadn't consulted a lawyer, but my years in corporate law made it convincing. I'm sure they'd be interested in the email explicitly uninviting me from an event I was funding. The line went silent for several seconds before Audrey spoke again, her voice now trembling with rage. You're ruining everything. Jean-Pierre's family will think we're just as classless and transactional as they assumed Americans would be. That's unfortunate. Perhaps you should have considered that before deciding I wasn't good enough to attend my only daughter's wedding. The call ended with Audrey hanging up. Within minutes, my email inbox began filling with messages, first from Audrey, then Jean-Pierre, and finally his father. The tone progressed from angry to pleading to threatening. Jean-Pierre's father, a distinguished attorney himself, outlined potential legal action for breach of verbal contract and damages to family reputation. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called Joan, my closest friend since law school, and explained the situation. Her outrage on my behalf was validating after months of questioning myself. You did the right thing, she assured me. What Audrey and these people are doing is emotional extortion. Stand your ground. Throughout the day, the messages continued. By evening, Audrey's approach had shifted to emotional manipulation. How could you abandon me like this? After everything we've been through together, I thought you loved me. I drafted and deleted multiple responses before finally sending, I do love you. That's why this hurts so deeply. Love should be unconditional. Presence at your wedding apparently is not. The next morning brought a voice message from Jean-Pierre's mother, her accented English, precise and cutting. Madame Meyer, your behavior confirms everything we suspected about American values, or lack thereof. Audrey deserves better than a mother who would sabotage her future out of spite. Perhaps your absence from the wedding is indeed for the best. This was followed by an ultimatum from Audrey. Either I reinstate the payment immediately, or I would no longer be welcome in her life at all. Choose now, Mum, the wedding or me. With painful clarity, I realized she had it backward. She was the one who had already made her choice Jean-Pierre's approval over our relationship. My refusal to pay was simply the consequence of her decision, not the cause of our rift. I didn't respond to the ultimatum. Instead, I called my financial advisor and scheduled a meeting to discuss reallocating the wedding funds toward my long-delayed retirement plans. Through mutual friends, I learned that the wedding had been dramatically downsized and moved to Jean-Pierre's family chateau. Audrey posted carefully curated photos on social media, intimate gathering of close friends and family. She called it, though not a single person from her American life was present. She looked beautiful, but tense, in the images, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as she posed beside Jean-Pierre and his beaming parents. I wasn't tagged or mentioned in any of the posts. According to our shared acquaintances, when asked about my absence, Audrey simply said she couldn't make it with no further explanation. The finality of it was breathtaking. 30 years of motherhood erased from what should have been one of our most meaningful shared experiences. I grieved as if for a death, because in many ways it was. The death of the relationship I thought we had. The death of the daughter I thought I knew. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life as an individual, rather than primarily as Audrey's mother. I renovated my home office into an art studio, taking painting classes I'd always been curious about, but too busy to pursue. I joined a travel group for single women, over 50 booking trips to destinations I'd always wanted to visit, but had saved for someday, starting with Italy, where I embraced my imperfect attempts at a new language, without shame. The wedding money, now safely reinvested, would allow me to retire as planned at 65. There was something powerfully affirming about reclaiming my future, about acknowledging that my remaining years had value beyond what I could give or provide to others. Still, there was an Audrey-shaped hole in my life that nothing could quite fill. I kept her childhood artwork on my refrigerator. I still instinctively reached for my phone on Sunday mornings, our traditional call time. I walked through boutiques and thought, Audrey would love this, before remembering our estrangement. 6 months after the wedding, with no contact beyond my unanswered Christmas card, I had begun to accept that our relationship might never recover. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors. Through the peephole, I saw a figure in a raincoat hood pulled up against the downpour. When I opened the door, I found myself face to face with my daughter for the first time in half a year. The composed, polished Audrey from her wedding photos was nowhere to be seen. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face free of makeup, dark circles prominent under her eyes. She looked younger, somehow vulnerable, in a way I hadn't seen since her college years. "Mum," she said, her voice breaking on that single syllable. I stood frozen for a moment, a storm of emotions rendering me speechless. Then instinct took over, and I stepped back to let her in. She stood dripping on the entryway tile, looking around as if seeing my home for the first time. In truth, it had changed. New paint colours, rearranged furniture artwork from my classes now hanging on walls. It was a physical manifestation of my own transformation. "You've redecorated," she said quietly. "Yes. Would you like some tea? You should get out of that wet coat." The normality of the exchange felt surreal after months of silence and hurt. We moved to the kitchen like actors following stage directions, performing the rituals of polite interaction, while the weight of unspoken words hung between us. As I prepared tea, Audrey sat at the kitchen table running her fingers over its surface. "You kept it," she said, indicating the small carving in one corner, her initials etched secretly when she was 12. I'd been furious then, but couldn't bring myself to replace the table in all the years since. "Of course I did." Silence stretched between us until I placed a steaming mug before her and took the opposite seat. "Why are you here, Audrey?" She wrapped her hands around the mug, not drinking, just absorbing its warmth. "Everything's fallen apart," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "You were right about all of it." I waited, giving her space to continue. "After the wedding, things changed. Jean-Pierre's family. They were never going to fully accept me no matter what I did or who I cut out of my life." She looked up, tears forming. "They found fault with everything. My accent, my mannerisms, even the way I arranged flowers in our apartment. Nothing was ever French enough, sophisticated enough." I nodded, unsurprised, but still saddened by the confirmation. 2 months ago, I found messages on Jean-Pierre's phone. He's been having an affair with his ex-girlfriend. Her voice cracked. "It started before our wedding. His mother knew. She told him it was natural to have a French mistress alongside an American wife who would never truly belong." Anger flared within me, not for the money spent on a doomed marriage, but for my daughter's pain and humiliation. Yet beneath the anger was a troubling question. Hadn't Audrey done to me exactly what Jean-Pierre's family had done to her? Deemed me unsuitable, embarrassing, not belonging. "I'm sorry that happened to you," I said carefully. "No one deserves that kind of betrayal." Audrey's composure crumbled entirely. "I've been such a fool. I threw away everything real for people who never valued me, who saw me as nothing more than an American novelty." She looked up, tears streaming now. "I threw away you, the one person who always loved me unconditionally." "Not quite unconditionally," I corrected gently. "I love you deeply, Audrey, but I couldn't continue enabling behavior that was harmful to both of us. That's why I cancelled the payment." "I know." She wiped at her tears. "I was so angry then, but now I understand. You were setting a boundary when I desperately needed one. I'd lost myself completely, Mum. I don't even recognize the person who wrote that horrible email." The acknowledgement was important, but it didn't erase the hurt. "Where do you go from here?" I asked. "I've left him. I'm staying in a hotel while looking for an apartment in New York. I've accepted a position at the Metropolitan Museum, a step down from my Paris role, but at least it's something." She hesitated. "I don't expect forgiveness or financial help or anything, really. I just needed to see you to tell you I'm sorry. So deeply sorry for everything." Her remorse seemed genuine, but the bridge between us had been severely damaged. Trust once broken so profoundly couldn't be repaired with a single conversation. "Audrey, I appreciate your apology. I truly do. But we can't just pick up as if nothing happened. You chose status and acceptance over our relationship. You were ashamed of me, of your own mother and your upbringing." She flinched at the directness, but didn't deny it. "I was, and that's unforgivable." "Not unforgivable," I said softly. but not easily forgotten either. Rebuilding trust takes time and consistent effort. I'm willing to try if you are, but it needs to be a new relationship, one with mutual respect and boundaries, not just falling back into mother-daughter roles where I give and you take. Audrey nodded slowly. I understand. I've been in therapy trying to figure out why I was so easily influenced, why I valued the wrong things so highly. I think I've always been searching for something, approval or validation or something I felt was missing. What about your father? I suggested gently. Her eyes widened slightly. Maybe. I never thought about it that way. The therapist mentioned something similar, that Jean-Pierre's family represented some kind of legitimacy or completion I was seeking. You never needed their validation, Audrey. You were already whole and worthy exactly as you were. As we were, she corrected quietly. You and me, the family we built together. She reached across the table tentatively. Can we try again? Differently this time. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her beyond the hurt and betrayal. I saw the little girl who had once held my hand so tightly, the teenager who had shared her dreams, the young woman who had lost her way. And despite everything, love remained. Yes, I said, taking her offered hand. We can try. The year following Audrey's return was one of careful rebuilding. We started with weekly coffee meetings, neutral territory, where we could re-establish connection without falling into old patterns. I listened as she processed her failed marriage, her professional setbacks, her ongoing therapy insights. She listened, truly listened perhaps for the first time in years, to my experiences during our estrangement. I want to learn French properly, I told her during one of our early meetings. Not to impress anyone, just for myself. Would you practice with me sometimes? This simple request became a healing ritual. Every Sunday, we'd spend an hour with language textbooks and audio programs, laughing at my pronunciation errors, celebrating small victories. The language that had once been a barrier between us became a bridge, a shared project without the power dynamics of our past. Audrey's divorce from Jean-Pierre was finalized 6 months after her reappearance on my doorstep. The process was complicated by French laws and his family's attempts to protect their assets, but she emerged with a fresh start and hard-earned wisdom. I don't regret the experience entirely, she confessed over dinner one evening. I regret how I behaved the people I hurt, especially you. But the lessons I learned about myself, I needed those as painful as they were. My own journey continued as well. I retired as planned, embracing the freedom to pursue interests beyond career and motherhood. My art classes led to a small exhibition at a local gallery. The travel group introduced me to wonderful new friends with similar life experiences. I dated occasionally, enjoying male companionship without the pressure of serious commitment. When Audrey tentatively introduced me to Daniel, an architectural historian she'd met through work, I was struck by how differently she carried herself in this relationship. There was none of the performance I'd witnessed with Jean-Pierre, no code switching or anxiety about making a good impression. She was authentically herself, the daughter I had raised, but also the woman she had become, through both achievement and adversity. Daniel, American-born, with Brazilian parents, spoke 4 languages fluently, but never made anyone feel less for speaking only one. He asked thoughtful questions about my career, my artwork, my opinions. Most importantly, he clearly valued Audrey for her mind and heart, not as an accessory or status symbol. He wants to meet my whole family, Audrey told me, smiling. My Aunt Joan, my cousins, everyone. He says he wants to understand where I come from. 9 months into their relationship, Audrey and Daniel planned a trip to Milwaukee to visit my childhood neighborhood and meet my remaining relatives. The night before their departure, Audrey called me, sounding uncharacteristically nervous. "Mum, I've been thinking about something. Our trip to Europe last month was wonderful, but I realized we've never done a real vacation, just the two of us, since everything happened." The trip she referenced had been a group tour through Spain and Portugal, lovely, but shared with Daniel and several of my travel group friends. "What did you have in mind?" I asked. "Remember how we used to talk about seeing the national parks someday? Nothing fancy, just hiking and sightseeing. Could we maybe do that this fall? Just you and me?" The suggestion touched me deeply. Not Paris, not five-star hotels, not status-seeking experiences, but something authentic and grounded, a return to the values I'd tried to instill. "I'd love that," I said simply. Last Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner at my home, a table filled with friends, family, and new connections. Before the meal, Audrey asked for everyone's attention, standing with her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "I want to take a moment to acknowledge something important," she began. "2 years ago, I lost sight of what truly matters. I chose appearances over substance, status over love. I hurt the one person who had always been there for me, always supported me, always loved me." She looked down at me, eyes glistening. "My mum taught me about unconditional love, not just through her words, but through her actions my entire life. And when I needed it most, she taught me about healthy boundaries too." The table was silent, everyone aware of the broad strokes, if not the details, of our estrangement. "I'm thankful every day for second chances," Audrey continued, "for the opportunity to rebuild what I nearly destroyed, for a mother wise enough to know that sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no." That evening, after guests had departed and Audrey was helping me load the dishwasher, she asked quietly, "Do you think we're okay now, Mum? Really okay?" I considered the question seriously. Our relationship had transformed through crisis. It was stronger in some ways, more honest, more balanced with clearer boundaries. In other ways, there remained a tender spot, a scar tissue of hurt that might always be sensitive to the touch. "I think we're better than okay," I said finally. "We're real now. No pretense, no perfect mother, perfect daughter narrative. Just two flawed, loving humans doing our best." Audrey nodded, understanding the depth behind my words. "That's enough, isn't it? Maybe that's everything." I reflect often on what I learned through this painful chapter, that love without boundaries isn't really love at all, but enablement. That sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children is the courage to let them face the consequences of their choices. That we teach people how to treat us not just through what we accept, but what we refuse to accept. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to redefine yourself, to establish healthy boundaries, to demand the respect you deserve, even from those you love most deeply, perhaps especially from them. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members you love? How did it change your relationship? I'd be so grateful if you'd share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more authentic life stories. And if you know someone struggling with family boundaries, share this video. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these difficult journeys is the greatest comfort. Thank you for listening to my story. I wish you courage and clarity in your own relationships.